Hi everyone, my name is Bernard Jackman. Delighted to be here on Beyond 80 looking back on what was an amazing first weekend of Six Nations action. I'm going to be joined by Sam Larner a little bit later on to look at some of the data behind the performances. But first of all, I'm going to look at one key moment from the three games which I feel had a major influence in the game being won or lost, and also maybe something that the coaches need to fix in the coming weeks to help their team have the best possible placing in this year's Six Nations. So the first game we're going to look back at is Italy against England. I think Italy would be really happy. They put it up to England. Big first game for Gonzalo Quesada, and they showed real attacking intent. And that's probably the future for Italy. That's what Benetton do. That's what Zebra do. That's what some of these young Italian backs in particular have as their super strength. So Quesada seems to be rebuilding their confidence. From an English point of view, obviously, semi-final was a World Cup, but they need to evolve. Felix Jones has come as defence coach. There's obviously an attacking philosophy that's slightly starting to change as well, and we talk about it a little bit later with Sam. But from a defensive point of view, they're trying to replicate that Springboks defence. Felix Jones' apprenticeship was under Nino Barra with Munster and under Razzie and Nino Barra with the Springboks. And it's obvious, and it was obvious from this game, that they're bringing that rush defence into play. It won't happen overnight, and there was errors, and we're going to look at one of those. But Jack Nino Barra famously said his very first game with the Springboks, there were 23 points down at half-time. The players came into the dressing room, it was against England, and they wanted to change, they wanted to modify, they wanted to use the touchline as an extra defender. He said, no, we go faster, we go harder. And if I see any player who's not doing that, I'm going to take them off. Felix Jones will be the same. He will encourage his players just to do this better. But until they get it right, it can lead them into trouble. And we're going to have a look at an example where that lack of detail, that lack of clarity, that lack of understanding cost them dearly. So I think this Italian try for Alan is a really good example of what Felix Jones wants to do, but also how they need to improve. So we'll just let it unfold here. So it's off a ruck in the 15-metre channel, and they play that little loop play out the back to the 10. Now you see England have tried to close, but they haven't been able to close in time. They've been too narrow. And then once they get in behind them, in fairness to Italians, they really executed that. But there's two issues here. One is England are way too narrow. Two, when the open side wing comes in to close, he doesn't shut the ball down. 15 is late to close as well, and they're busted. But the biggest issue is the inside scramble isn't there. So we've seen South Africa so often be beaten on the outside, but the likes of Pieter-Steph du Toit scrambling towards that corner flag, bodies just getting across the field and snuffing out the danger. When England got beaten here in the front line, there was no scramble that could actually save them. And that's an area that I'll be working on, as long as also actually getting more width on your defence and getting those wingers to be able to come in and get man and ball. So we can see here the intent from England. Jack Nino Barra says it takes 14 games to implement this system. It did with the Springboks. He's telling Leinster players it'll take 14 games for them as well. In international rugby, 14 games could take you 2 years. If England are going to be real contenders for this year's Six Nations, they need to be better this weekend against Wales and in subsequent games so they can actually go and potentially lift this trophy, because I think they have the players to do so. Second game we're going to look at was a bonkers match in Cardiff. I was over there. To be honest, the first half was so poor from a Welsh point of view. The atmosphere was dead. At one stage, I think they were going to open the roof to let some atmosphere in. But Wales got back on track and they got something out of this game. But how did Scotland build that lead? How did they get such momentum in the first half? And a big part of that was the following moment they're going to show. It was a 50-22 from Finn Russell. It's a huge weapon to have. It's harder and harder to get in international rugby because teams protect their backfield. But when you get it right, it can actually be a key deciding factor in terms of winning a game. So we're going to have a look at how that unfolded and the impact it had on the game. So the following clip shows how Finn Russell found that space for the 50-22. Bit of kick tennis, and the ball is kicked to the Welsh fullback Cam Winnett, who's an excellent player. He scuffs his kick a little bit down the middle of the field, which allows Finn Russell have time to scan and see where the options are. Unfortunately for Wales, Cam Winnett had joined a kick chase line which left an open space to the right and to the left, and an amazing kick from Finn Russell just picks off that space, and it's a 50-22, which had a huge momentum shift in the game. So why is it so hard to find 50-22 space at international level? Because normally teams protect that backfield with two players who hover around the 15-metre line and protect both corners. And we're going to look at two examples of what Wales could have done differently, and certainly we'll be talking about early this week in terms of what they can't let happen against England. So the first example is Winnett kicks the ball and he chases his own kick. And at this stage, Josh Adams, the right winger, drops back to protect that right-hand side. And the 10, Sam Costello, moves across to the left. So there's the only kick space for Finn Russell is back down the middle of the field, which obviously they can pick up from either side. And the other option is that Winnett kicks, but actually doesn't go chase his kick. And then he protects the left-hand side, and Sam Costello protects the right-hand side. And again, you've got those two-type goalie situations, and there's no obvious space for that 50-22, which, as I said, is a huge momentum swinger. From a Welsh point of view, I think it's understandable there wasn't that same cohesion. They're in a period of, I suppose, evolution, new players coming in, the likes of Cam Winnett, inexperienced, but what a talent. The coaching staff, Neil Jenkins, Rob Howley, Alex King, Warren Gatlin, Mike Forshaw, they all have the experience, they all have the nous to be able to fix that quite quickly. And if they take that out of the game, stop giving teams easy entry points, given the quality they showed with the ball in hand the second half, they could be real contenders. In March Day, Friday night, Ireland laid down a marker that they are the team to beat in this year's competition. And a huge part of it was around their line-out success, 12 from 12, a massive improvement on the World Cup. But it wasn't just the stat of winning 100% of your line-outs, it was the quality of delivery and what Ireland did after that. 5 of Ireland's 5 tries came from line-out as a source. That's massive, 2 mauls, but I thought it was their attacking play off line-outs in the middle third, which really hurt France and put France on the back foot. We're going to look at the first one of these, the first try. It's a 2-phase line-out attack, and it got Ireland into their attacking shape. And also, some of the phase attack that Ireland used asked questions of the French defence, which they didn't have an answer to. So the clip we're going to show from the French game is the Gibson Park try, which comes from a line-out at source, and it's a 2-phase line-out attack, which manipulated that French defence and opened up the opportunity for the line break, which Gibson Park finished superbly. So it's off the top ball, with Gibson Park breaking out. He links with Doris. He's got decoy runners, but James Lowe is the key man. He sweeps really late and gets us into the gain line in the area of the field where we want to get to, which is just inside the 15-metre channel. So we can see here on the second phase, Ireland have gone around a corner with Hooker plus Tadhg Byrne, and they also have 3 backs still alive. And it's a lovely pass from Gibson Park across those 2 forward runners into Robbie Henshaw's hands, which actually creates that little bit of doubt in the French defence. Robbie Henshaw takes the ball to the line square, and Bundee Aki runs square and hard into that space and gets through that contact. And once he gets through contact, it's a lovely inside ball to Gibson Park, who scores. From a defensive point of view, Sean Edwards will be really disappointed with Damien Penaud. We know he's one of the best attackers in the world, but he gets too far across the field. He needs to be inside ball at all stages there and be able to make that tackle on Gibson Park, or use his speed to get to the outside if Bundee Aki passes the outside support. Again, it's a quick fix, but France will be very disappointed with how easily Ireland unlocked their defence just after 2 phases. That defeat and the manner of that defeat is a serious setback for France, and Galthy has a huge job rebuilding their confidence during the rest of this campaign. There's bound to be a lack of cohesion. New forwards coach, new attack coach, new S&C coach, but Sean Edwards will be so disappointed with that defensive performance. It's only the 4th time in 81 games that he's been a defence coach in the Six Nations they've conceded more than 3 tries. He will expect more of his players, so expect a big backlash defensively from France this weekend in Edinburgh. So those are my 3 key moments of the games of the weekend. Now we're going to move on to our Insights by Sage section with Sam Larner. Sam, you're very welcome to the Insight by Sage section of the show. What a weekend of action. What stood out to you in terms of the data?
For me, though, the big thing was scoreboard pressure. So across the 12 quarters that we saw in the 3 games, the winning team scored at least 3 points in 11 of those 12 quarters. So they were able just to keep the scoreboard ticking over, which is crucial if you want to win the game.
So are you saying teams should kick points early in the game just to get that momentum?
I think definitely. I think if you look at the Wales-Scotland game, obviously Wales were 20-0 down at half-time. They had chances to kick those points early in the match. They could have been even just 29 down. And then you think, with that second half comeback, they would have not only won, but won relatively comfortably.
If you're Scotland then, how do you see a first half where you're completely dominant to second half where you're hanging on for your dear life at the end? I mean, what changed data-wise in terms of that flip over?
Well, I think the first thing was, why was that first half so poor? And it comes down to the Welsh lineout. Not exclusively that, but the Welsh lineout was successful just 70% of the time on the weekend, and that's across the entire game. It got a lot better than the second half. 70%, for some context, would be the worst in the most recent World Cup. So that would put them below teams like Chile, below teams like Romania. It's not acceptable, really, at international level to be hitting just 70% of your lineouts. Realistically, in the modern age, we'd be expecting high 80s, low 90%, I guess, at lineout success.
Sam, let's talk about discipline. I think that had a major role in Scotland's collapse. 14 penalties in a row. I've never seen that in a Tier 1 game. I've never seen it in a junior Sunday pub team. What happened to Scotland? Why did they lose the run of themselves?
Well, it was amazing, really, because it wasn't just the second half. It actually started on the 20-minute mark. So at 20 minutes, Wales have 4 penalties and Scotland are giving away 2 penalties. And then, as you say, it completely flipped. Basically, until the nearly off the last minute when Kieran Azarati gave away a Welsh scrum penalty, there had been no Welsh penalties in that hour, and there had been, as you say, 14 Scottish penalties. In fact, it was actually worse than that. There were 17 Scottish penalties, but 3 of them, the advantage was played through and they weren't actually awarded. I think for me, a big part of this, and it's also what Finn Russell said after the game, was their ability to go after lost causes, or I guess not chase lost causes, really. He mentioned that at half-time they spoke about not going after those looks and that potential turnover ball, and that really cost them in the second half because they gave away half of those 14 penalties came at the look.
Yeah, it was really interesting. He said afterwards the players need to start listening to the messages from the coaches and the messages from him. But on Full Contact, on that Netflix series, he said Gregor has his plan, he has his own. And it's going to be really interesting as his leadership evolves, whether he becomes, I suppose, an ambassador, a spokesman for the coaches, and they're all on the same page. Or you saw what happened in that game where it just looked everyone was making their own individual decisions. The whole team cohesion defensively just fell away, and also the discipline fell away. And I felt, in fairness to Wales, they deserve credit. I thought they set up to kick a lot in the first half, a lot of box kicking from Gareth Davies. Tomas Williams came on. He obviously had freedom to play, and they dummy box kicked and then went to wit. And they got the ball into Rio Dyer and Josh Adams' hands a lot more and started to stretch that Scottish defence. But yeah, Scotland got away with it.
Well, absolutely. You mentioned there about playing to width. In fact, Wales had 45 looks outside the 15s in the second half compared to just 20 in the first half. And what also happened is their look speed went up, partly because your look speed will go up if you play out wide because there's fewer defenders there to slow it down. But it went up half a second from the first half to the second half. Now, that may not sound like a huge amount, but what it does is it gives you less time to set your defence. And ultimately, Scotland saw that. They gave away those penalties, partly because they were just desperate to slow that luck speed down.
Yeah, Joe Schmidt, the former Irish coach and All Blacks coach and current Australia coach, used to say that ruck speed is the heartbeat of a team. In the Ireland-France game, Ireland managed to have very high ruck speed. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. I think Ireland had really quick luck speed, and Wales actually had the slowest luck speed of anyone, even with that second half speed up. So one of the things we can talk about there is penalties conceded as a negative. But one thing that Scotland were able to do was to slow down Welsh ball. And obviously France weren't able to do that with Ireland. And we saw the two differences there, how many points France conceded, and then ultimately obviously Wales weren't successful in chasing down that total.
Okay, and let's look at that Ireland attack. Why are Ireland able to get that speed of ball at breakdown time?
So I think there's a number of things, and a lot of it comes down to accuracy. So accuracy of the clear out, and also something that we don't talk about a lot, but the work rate on the floor. So when you see someone get tackled, obviously if you've played rugby, what you might be used to is just collapsing and hoping that you get looked over so the ball emerges on your side. When you look at the professionals, what they're doing is they're working really hard to get that ball back as far as they can. The further back you get that ball, it doesn't matter then if you only get one man clearing out. It's away from the defence, so you can play it away quickly. So we talk about 3 seconds as kind of the golden rule of ruck speed. If you look at some of those Ireland rucks in that Friday night game, we're talking less than a second. You can barely put the stopwatch on them before the ball's away. Yeah,
I think the Sean Edwards defence, all good defence coaches, they're so strong on getting those 2-man hits, the +1, slowing that ruck ball down. But because Ireland have such variation and so many options, I think more often than not they're forcing the second defender to read and not get that connection on, and then the ball is easy. What else in the Ireland game stood out to you? The French line-out was poor?
Yeah, so the French line-out was poor, and I think it was caused by that Paul Willems, well, first of all, yellow card, and then obviously red card after that. So Willems is obviously a big line-out option for them. Most of the time you'll see teams flow into their second rows. In France, they tend to go to the back rows as well, a little bit more than they do in other nations. But what we see is that France were forced to go to 5 or 4-man lineouts, which is not something they usually do. So if we look back to the World Cup, they went to 5-man, 4-man or less lineouts around about 35% of the time, so 1 in 3 lineouts. In the most recent games, 16 of the 19 lineouts they had were 5-man or less. So that's not necessarily a problem, but obviously it suggests that they're being pushed towards a lineout option that they're not used to. And that really showed they weren't very successful at their lineouts. And obviously that gave Ireland not just possession, but actually turnover ball, which is such a damaging possession to have.
Yeah, the key stat for me was Sean Edwards after the game saying France had turned over the ball 14 times and Ireland only turned over the ball 4 times. And I think Galtier probably will regret not selecting Cameron Wookie for this game because, one, he's going to give them more options on their own throw, which wasn't anywhere near as productive as they would have liked. And 2, he would have got after that Ireland line-out. We spoke about that Ireland line-out, 12 from 12. 5 of the tries came from that source. And they pretty much had an easy ride. So maybe tactically and selection-wise, they made a little bit of an error there and they can fix that. But it's a turnover thing for me, which I think is something that France really have excelled at over the last 4 years. Is they're so good in that transition attack, but a lot of it's down to the individuals, the Penos, the Duponts, the Jalibert, etc. I know the new attack coach, but I think they need to be better at finding other sources of possession that they can turn into points.
Absolutely, and one of the things we've seen in this first weekend is about 60% of all tries have come from lineouts. That's more or less in keeping with what we were expecting in the leagues and obviously in the last Six Nations, last World Cup. If you can't score off your lineouts, then that takes away a huge chunk of the possibilities of scoring. And equally, something that we saw actually in the Scotland-Wales game is that if you fear your opponent's counter-attack from the kick, all you do is simply kick to touch. And that was what Ben White was absolutely fantastic at. His box kicks directly to touch, but also a long distance, forced Wales into those lineouts, took away that attacking threat of winger in the back line, really, and then obviously Johan Lloyd when he came on. It takes away those threats and forces you to play off that lineout. Now, obviously in Wales's case, that was not successful, but I think it shows you that you can manipulate how your opponent receives the ball. If they've got a good lineout, then simply keep the ball in play. If you're worried about their counter-attack threat, then stick it into the touch.
Other close game in Rome, Italy, England. What stood out to you there?
Yeah, so we can see these stats on the RugbyPass website, but we're looking at possession. And possession by itself doesn't mean a huge amount, so we kind of come to accept that just having a lot of ball doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win. But what we should be looking at is possession in the different zones. So we have 4 zones across the pitch. We've got your try line to 22, your 22 to halfway, halfway to the opposition 22, and then what we call the leg zone, the 22 to the try line. So what you want is you want possession in the opposition's half, because if you have it in your own half, really you're putting yourself under more pressure. That's not really where you want the ball. And if we look at what Italy and what England did, so Italy had 49% of possession in England's half, but for context, England had 78% of possession in Italy's half. One of the things we saw at the World Cup was really Kieran Crowley's resistance to kicking at all, and the problem there was that it made Italy go from wherever on the pitch they received the ball and put them under a lot of pressure. We're seeing them shift away from that, but they still have a little bit more work to do to make sure that it's not just a case of having the ball, but having it in the right areas.
Yeah, I think that's the misconception among some rugby fans is they think kicking's always negative, and also they sometimes think that teams like France or Ireland, who we remember the great tries, have a low kicking policy. Ireland actually outkicked France in terms of kicking, but also kick meters at the weekend, but yet was able to score some great tries. So I think possession is behind position. You know, so if you have a team who can play in the right areas of the field, get possession in those attacking areas, and then have the shape and the skill set to go execute, you're in a lot better place. What player stood out for you in terms of the data over the weekend in terms of having a huge impact on the game?
Adam Wainwright was massive for Wales.
Why did Finn Russell keep kicking kickoffs to him?
That's a very good question. Well, I guess there's 2 possible explanations here. So the one is that, and it's counterintuitive, but you kick to the best player so that you can bring them down, take them out for the phase, and then leave them ideally kicking away because their best ball carrier is down. Now that is a good idea often, but those kicks were too long, and so Alan Wainwright was getting a hedge of steam up, and you'll be more comfortable with that than me, Berger, but I would not want to tackle him with a 20-metre run up. And I think Scotland were just feeding Welsh possession, and it got that sense of the momentum was so far against them that even simple things like a kickoff, which is entirely in your control where you put that ball, they was going against Scotland. So I think for me, Alan Wainwright was a massive part of that. I think in Italy, if you look at Alessandro Gabisi, his pass speed is unbelievable, and he really is the linchpin for that Italian backline, is that he gets quick ball to them, and it allows them to play that kind of expansive attacking game. And when we talk about pass speed, we've obviously now got the trackers in the ball, so we can see how quick that is. We're talking about 40 kilometres an hour for that pass from 9 to 10. So what that does is it just gives the defence a little bit less time. It means you're around them onto their soft spot before they really know what's happening. I think he's one to look for. Obviously, we all know about his brother, Paolo, but I think Alessandro Gabisi is one to really look for.
From the Irish game, Joe McCarthy was man of the match, but Tyg Burr and Caelan Doris had huge games as well.
Yeah, Caelan Doris in particular was absolutely outstanding. So we look at something called attacking ruck entries. So this is simply how many rucks you're at and kind of what you do there. It's not something that we often see on TV really, but it means that second rows and some back rows get a little bit underappreciated because they're doing a lot of this ruck hitting, which then frees up everyone else to make the big carries. And Doris hit 31 rucks on on Friday night, and he also carried into 10 rucks. So that combination of 41 rucks that he was either present at or set up was a third of every single Irish ruck. So if you think about the work rate to get up, make a carry, get back up, hit a ruck, get back up, hit another ruck, it's unbelievable that the effort he was doing. And obviously Ty Byrne will rightly get the plaudits because his carry numbers were bigger. But I think a lot of that was because he was freed up to make those carries because Doris was kind of doing the hard work that perhaps he doesn't always get the credit for.
Sam, thanks so much for that. Really interesting data behind the performances of the weekend.